hardcore boxing fans out there, how are you doing? Big Porky here, the voice of hardcore boxing, and I hope you've subscribed as well, or I'll be coming to pay you a visit. Porky's Corner is proud to be sponsored by Spartan Site Solutions. They are specialists in civil engineering and demolition contracts for the construction industry. Interested parties should visit their website or contact Porky's Corner for a referral at porkycorner@mail.com. Welcome to part 2. Thanks for liking and subscribing and leaving a comment. Hope you're enjoying the videos this evening. We believe in saying what we think. What do you reckon, Rocky? Do you fancy a penguin? Here we go. Here's Julian. Pop, pop, bang, it's Julian. The promotion of the show and the actual pyrotechnics and all that all look pretty flash, didn't it?
Yeah, apart from the most important thing, the cameramen, for the people watching it who had paid for it. I'm a bit OCD with certain things. And what became really apparent as I was watching the first, I mean, obviously we had half an hour where the broadcast left and it kept scanning in and scanning out. But what I noticed when the fighters were in the ring, the cameramen were positioned in the wrong place and they kept getting the backs of people's heads and weird crops and stuff. And then when they're interviewing the fighters on afterwards, people will look back and watch this now. It were like we'd got two GCSE students filming that. So they've spent all that money on this promotion. And the cameramen were horrific. People say, what's that got to do? That's so important. Is you talk about the broadcast quality, and you're paying some of those world champions £250,000 to come over and to seduce us all because the event looked unbelievable, but the quality of the cameramen and the quality of that side of things was horrendous. And like in between rounds, you know, cutting out and showing celebrities and then flicking across to the fight at the beginning of the round and missing the first 1 or 2 seconds. And like I said, the interviews before and after, and if you just watch it now, it literally was like they got 2 students filming it on an iPhone. Horrendous. I don't know how many people would have spotted that, by the way, because media is my thing, isn't it? But the production in terms of the event and the PR and the people who were there was the stuff of dreams. It was what dreams were made of. But the camera action and the technical fault for half an hour was abysmal.
Yeah. Frampton had it for Ngannou, didn't he? Lennox Lewis didn't, and then Dan Hardy had it for Ngannou. Then Lennox were backtracking, saying, well, it depends what you're looking for, and could have gone either way, and you know, blah blah. They all backtracked, didn't they? Plus, it were funny.
What is this, right? I mean, I know that people were saying, a few people saying, what did Jules think about it? And I'm like you, Russell. People know you love your boxing, you're into your boxing, you know your boxing. So you get messages all the time. Your phone's a lot hotter than mine. But I always get people saying, what did you think to the fight? I went to the gym during the week. Lads were saying, what do you think to the fight, Jules? People at work, what do you think to the fight? I'll tell you where I scored it. Yeah. And I'm always consistent. Every single time you ask me about a certain decision, which people think is unpopular, I'm always consistent. When you have a fight where for 10 or 12 rounds, in this case 10 rounds, in 6 or 7 of those rounds, neither man's doing a thing. I'm talking about landing 3 or 4 punches each. Before anybody talks to me about the punch stats, I'm going to read something. But when you've got a fight, when you've got the majority of that fight, hardly anything is happening. Nobody can complain about being robbed. Technically, I thought Ngannou won the fight. But what I don't like is when fighters complain about being robbed in rounds 9 and 10, neither Fury or Ngannou, I think Fury threw a few more, but neither Fury or Ngannou bit down and tried to put that fight in the bag. And when that happens, you can't complain, Russell. You leave the fight in the ring. I've always worked with fighters who have left it in the ring. Simple. That's just how it is. And then when you've given everything, and you've let your hands go, you can comment on the decision. But when you stood there, and I think Ngannou in the last 2 rounds landed about 5 punches and Fury landed about 8 and 9. I'm not talking taps, I'm talking punches. In 6 minutes of action, don't complain, don't moan. You never saw Evander Holyfield doing that. Don't complain. Watch round 15 of Larry Holmes and Ken Norton. Never see a better round in your life in boxing. Those are 2 fighters who wanted to put an exclamation mark on the fight and they wanted to win. I just saw 2 guys after the 8th round just looking at each other. And I read something or someone said, oh, Fury might have pulled it out in the last 2 rounds because he put his foot on the pedal. He did what? He threw absolutely fuck all in those last 2 rounds, and Ngannou threw even less. So as far as I'm concerned, don't complain about the decision when you haven't left it in the ring. Had it gone to Ngannou, no issue at all, no complaints at all. Had it gone to Fury, no complaints at all. I scored it to Ngannou, 5 rounds to 4. We've won even. I watched it twice, so that gives Ngannou a 2-point win for me, 96-94. That's how I scored.
With knockdown.
Yeah, with a knockdown, 96-94, 5-4-1 is how I scored it. I will say, hand on heart, there were 4 of those rounds I could have tossed a coin. I could have literally tossed a coin. But this is what we need to talk about. And I'm not being patronising. I'm just talking. I've mentioned this before. People need to be really, really clear about what they're looking for when they're scoring a fight. They have to be really clear about what is involved in scoring a fight. Now, people automatically go to the punch stats. The punch stats can generally be a guide and a yardstick, but we're talking about scoring blows. We're not talking about taps.
Didn't help Robin Reed with Carl Zaggy, did it? Because he landed more.
But as I'm saying, it didn't. But it's not just about the volume, and it's first of all, right. I'm gonna talk about this. Yeah, I haven't had this for a while, but it's consistent. The British Boxing Board Control Handbook. I was a license holder for 20 years. Amateur coach before that. There are rules around scoring of the fights, and trainers know what those rules are, and trainers work on certain things at certain stages of a round to try and convince judges you've won a round. Now, the first thing I'm going to say is no judge. There's not one judge in boxing, any organization, Vegas, Nevada, British Boxing Board of Control, anywhere. There's not one judge in boxing who counts punches. You don't do it. Of course, you're aware holistically over 3 minutes of action. If one guy is landing significantly more punches than the other, you're aware of it. But what you're not aware is, I think Ngannou landed 5 punches in that round and Fury landed 6. So I'm going to give that round to Tyson Fury. Scoring doesn't work like that. So look, I'll just read this out. Right. Points will be awarded for attack. Direct clean hits with the knuckle part of the glove or either hand to any part of the front or side of the head and body above the belt. So first of all, direct clean hits with the knuckle part of the glove. We're not talking cuffing shots. Now, I think there are people out there watching, there are people in the punch stats who are just, a shot goes in the direction of a guy, it either skims him, hits him high, cuffs him, that's a hit. It's not a hit, Russell, right? You know this, you've been around it long enough. It's not a hit. Knuckle part of the glove. It's the same in amateur boxing. If you don't land in the knuckle part of the glove, if you land under the knuckle, the side, the back of the hat, whatever, it doesn't count. So judges are only looking at the knuckle part of the glove. Now, when I watched that, I thought ever so slightly in Nganou's punches, I was aware that there was a bit less of them. There were less blows what came in contact with Fury's head or body, but there were the knuckle part of the glove. There were cleaner hits for me. A lot of Tyson's punches were skimming, cuffing. They weren't really clean. I think he landed 3 or 4 1-2s during the course of the fight that got through. But generally, it wasn't clean work, Russell. And what happens, right? And I know I sound like a dickhead. I don't mean to be. I'm just trying to get this across to people, because all I've heard about is, if you jump online and you have a look, all they hear about is punch stats. People go on about punch stats. Yeah. I'm an ex-coach. I know what's required to win rounds. Terry Chappindama, I'll tell you exactly the same, right? Peter Fury will tell you exactly the same. Punch stats only matters when they're clean. Then obviously it talks about below the belt. Now what here is it talks about in the rules, and these are the rules of boxing, for defence, guarding, slipping, ducking, or getting away from an attack. Where contestants are otherwise equal, the majority of points, and this is really key, the majority of points will be given to the one who does the most leading off or displays the better style. So you're a judge. You've got an even round. When I say an even round, Fury might land 6 or 7, Ngannou might land 4 or 5, but you don't have those numbers in your head. So you thinking of the 3 minutes, you're thinking close-ish round. You drop to criteria 2, and that criteria 2 is leading off, forcing the action. The guy who's forcing the action, or the guy who's got the better style, the better defense. And that's what people, I think, are struggling with. They're being skewed by the punch stats. They're being skewed by all the noise. And what I encourage people to do is to watch the fight. So, for example, I think it was the 10th round. The consensus of opinion was that Fury won the last 2 rounds. And it might have been the 10th or the 9th. I'm going to get this wrong. But when I watched it, because it's so forgettable, by the way, when I watched the 10th round again, I saw Fury not landing cleanly. He was throwing a few shots. You've heard me talk about the don't hit me punches, haven't you? The shots when you're coming away, the tip taps. Those don't count. And Ngannou only landed about 3 punches or 4 punches in the 10th round. But there were the knuckle part of the glove. There were really clean punches. And for me, they won the round. And that was the difference between, you're so patient with me, Russell, by the way, but that was the difference with me during the fight, was I thought ever so slightly in a really poor fight, Ngannou landed the cleaner blows with the knuckle part of the glove. Not his hand, not a slack hand, not an open hand, like that Larry Holmes used to do. He used to like ever so slightly open that jab out a little bit, and then he'd slam it and close it down. Fury was throwing quite a few shots where he really wasn't tensing, and he wasn't landing the knuckle part of the glove. So technically, I thought he got beat.
You think you're fighting loose? You think you're fighting loose and not forced because you were tired?
It was definitely fighting loose. There's also an element of some people. I used to spar with, it was when I realised I should stop sparring with boxers and I just shouldn't do it. I used to spar with a kid called Tyrone McInerney. Very, very dear friend of mine. Massively talented fighter who didn't sell tickets, and the rest is history, but he was a former national champion. Now, in the early days, I used to spar with him. We still message each other and chat about it now and again. Well, the point I'm getting to, he was a known kid. He was a very, very useful kid from the Huddersfield area. Only 10 stone, but very useful kid. And he had a head and a neck just like I've not seen before on someone his size. Now, when I used to spar with him, I was always pretty heavy-handed as an amateur. The one thing I could do was crack. I used to spar with Tyrone. We never were head guards and stuff at Keith Tate's. And 4 or 5 times I'd land on him full. I had to contain him because when he was a novice, I had to contain him. I was about 25 at the time. And I remember hitting him and hurting my hand, Russell. And I started to pull the shots with Tyrone. Not because I was cracking him hard, because it was just like hitting this table here. He'd got a brick of a head. So I think there's an element with Fury. Fury knows boxing and Fury knows fighting. There's an element with Tyson. I think he thought, I can't hurt this guy at all, but I'm probably going to do my hands more damage. So he just started getting those shots in. Not many, but they were getting the shots in, but they weren't really effective.
The flurry scoring shots, flashy shots, weren't they? For
yep. And according to that, clean part of the glove, knuckle part of the glove, leading off, those are all criteria in boxing. And people listen to the narrative, they listen to the commentary, and that's why everybody ringside and everybody who was at that fight, everyone had a different opinion, didn't they?
Mm.
But how many of those people outside of a small group really understand the scoring of boxing? And I don't mean that to be patronizing, because it's like any sport. It's like when you try to look, I've seen you, you always play it down. Yeah. You're a pretty good bloody snooker player, mate. I've seen you with a cue, and I've seen you're all right, mate. Give props where props are, right? You can hold a cue and you can shoot snooker. Now, how complex is snooker compared to pool?
Very.
Massively complex. Well, so is boxing. And you have to be absorbed in it and educated in it and around it. And I'll quote Terry Chappindama again. You have to be around it and in it all the time to fully understand what constitutes scoring, which is why we have, they get it wrong sometimes, but this is why we have qualified, trained judges who know what they're looking at. And we don't have people from social media judging fights.
Yeah.
Very complex. It's complex. You have to really know what you're looking at when you're watching a fight. It's not the guy who lands the most shots. It's not the guy who gets the most cheers from the crowd. You got to see all that stuff. You got to look at people's balance, how they react to shots, the whole thing. And the one thing we did see was Fury wasn't reacting well to a lot of those shots. And there was a moment in the 8th round. If in the 3rd round he thought, what the hell am I doing in here? There was a moment in the 8th round, you could see him just thinking, if there was an ejector seat now, I'd take it.
Yeah, I think I saw it in the 2nd round after they had a grip up with him. And he
squeeze, isn't it? It's that squeeze.
He never tried out on inside after that, Fury, because usually he mauls them, doesn't he, if he's tired. But there was none of that where he had to stay on his feet, didn't he? And that's why he looked tired. Because he also had to force it after knockdown as well. And he were all at sea, wasn't he, really? I think
he was hitting a brick wall.
I think he was battling his fitness and the fact that Ngannou wasn't engaging and the fact that he needed to engage but to win it, but he didn't want to get clipped. And I think all sorts of going through his head.
I think you're absolutely right. I think there were so many things happening to Tyson Fury. You could almost read his expressions, couldn't you? He generally has a game face, doesn't he?
Yeah, he was thinking, what am I doing here? Because he's been in all sorts of situations, hasn't he?
What am I doing in here with this guy? And as you've said, that the physicality inside when he was squeezing him, and he was just literally just pushing himself against him. Fury generally works inside, doesn't it? Look what he did with Cunningham.
He was throwing him about, wasn't he? He threw him down twice.
He was ragging him about. Yeah, he'd snap Tyson Fury in half. He'd snap him in half. It was hand-to-hand combat. I know it's a different sport, and I think Fury's like, thing is, you think, first of all, how do you prepare for Ngannou? Because you don't know what he's got. We've no idea what he's got. But you expect a little bit more of a conventional style, don't you? And then you've got the guy who's switching. So his Fury switches, Ngannou switches, but Fury switching didn't work at all, did it? It didn't do anything. There was no like really purposeful right jabs or left crosses when he switched. There was no dirty boxing inside. There was a couple of moments, I think, in the 3rd or 4th when Ngannou just threw a couple of little dirty shots, didn't you? You know, those like they do, they're in a clinch and they throw the right hook. And all Fury was wanting to do was to just get that referee to break them up. But he didn't know how to approach the fight, did he? I can't dance and get rhythm because I'm hitting elbows because he's so awkward. I can't step forward because he's got this extended guard. He's switching, and he's timing me, and then he gets cracked in the third round by literally an arm punch. If you watch it back, this man must be such a strong man to just throw like a cuffing arm punch. There was no recoil on the shot. If you watch that left hook from Ngannou, there was absolutely no recoil, no hip movement, no rotation, just pop like that. And then he flattened him. So Tyson Fury would have deep down, you could see, you and I were talking about it before, you could see his eyes, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Because he didn't have a great boxer in front of him. He didn't have a real quality boxer in front of him.
Scared to death to me. I'm being honest, up close with him. He looked really worried. He looked like he ran out of ideas up close.
And it just, nothing he did at all worked, did it? And I think the first time we've ever seen it, and he'll probably never admit it, but you're right. I think he was intimidated by Ngannou.
I mean,
I've no issue with Fury winning the fight. I got no issue because none of them did enough in the last 2 rounds. I thought Ngannou won, but I don't have an issue with Fury winning the fight because it was such a pitiful fight to score. But what have we not heard, Russell? What have we not heard since Saturday?
We've not heard a peek out of them, have we?
But what have we not heard? We haven't heard rematch with Ngannou.
No, we aren't. We're not calling
every fight for Ngannou. The Fury Usyk, 2 fights. Ngannou Wilder today. Ngannou Joshua. He can do it. Ngannou could even fight Joe Joyce. Warren's saying he'll sign him. No one's mentioning Ngannou Fury. Well, I thought they had a rematch clause.
Spencer Brown says they're going to do Usyk twice and then Ngannou earlier on.
You look at a guy like Ngannou and you think, do they want any part of that man ever again? And he's not a great boxer, by the way. But I'll tell you something. He's not getting knocked over, is he?
No.
That's the problem. The physicality of that man was absolutely... I didn't expect that. I knew he'd be a strong guy. I knew he'd be a physical guy, but I thought boxing-wise he'd be pretty poor. And I stand by that. It wasn't great, but it was bloody awkward and it was physically strong. And Fury were just like hitting a brick wall. And I think the brick wall hit him back, didn't it, in the second and third round? And it's like, who the hell's talked me into this?
Yeah. Well, they talked his son into it because he's got a greedy belly.
50 million, was it 45, 50 million or something like that? I just thought it was a real bad night for boxing. It was a bad night for Fury. It was a great night for Fury's bank manager and his advisors and all the people. And it was a great night for, his next
they did all that Gypsy King stuff with merchandise, didn't they?
Yeah, look, the one thing what's frustrated me out of all this was it's also unnecessary because we got a guy who's crossed over. And Ngannou was a great character. He came across as a really good guy, hell of a story, hell of a backstory. But we've got this guy now everybody's calling out. Ngannou's proven he's now a top 10er. There's some great fights. So there's a guy who's 0-1 and everybody's calling him out. And that's the point. Are we so desperate for great fights? And people really should be talking about, Fabio Wardley from Saturday. They should be talking about Mosai Tuma and the guys coming through because I tell you, they're at the top of the table. That's the best we've got.
It's all Ngannou talk, isn't it, today?
It's all Ngannou. Ngannou's probably the most tweeted or Googled boxer on the planet right now. And I just think it's such a shame, mate.
You think Eddie Hills will sign him, Jules?
Well, the one thing's for sure with Francis Ngannou is an enigma, isn't he? He's a guy he's an interesting person. He's a beast of a man. He isn't going to fight in the cage anytime soon, is he? Because the one thing boxing does do is it generates massive money, doesn't it? Money that MMA either doesn't generate or they won't pay them. It's one or the other. But Ngannou was going to fight again. And I think he'll fight again. He'll get beat. He might have one more freak fight and get beat again. And he'll probably just go back to MMA or retire. But no one's mentioning, I've mentioned it earlier, but it's all about Fury, a bit rusty or what. This guy's not fought for 2 years and had a really bad knee operation in Ngannou, and he's 37 years old himself at sometime soon. So no one mentions that, do they? It's all about Fury. It's all about Fury. I mean, you got to ask the question. I mean, I think Fury's dropped down that much of a level. I don't know if he can get back up, but you got to ask the question: what if Ngannou had a couple of 8-rounders under his belt? Got you a couple more camps, got used to it.
Yeah.
We might have had definitely a different result on Saturday.
Yeah, imagine.
They might consider themselves lucky that they got away with that, and you might not hear Fury and Ngannou ever again.
Well, they got away with Otto Wall in one, didn't they? And John McDermott.
Well, this is the thing, you see. Some fighters,
The first Wilder one with knockdown at end.
Yeah, they got the counts and all that kind of stuff, and
long count that wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It's the long count, and it's not just the long count; it's the time then they give them once they get up and talk to them. Well, look at Joshua and Andy Ruiz in the 7th round. Referee were almost having a half-an-hour conversation with Joshua. I wanted to try and get him to continue.
He asked Tyson a question. Tyson went, "Pardon."
So say it again, mate. Say it again.
What, mate? Tyson bought another 10 seconds off him.
And this is it, isn't it?
Tyson went, "You what? It's my brother-in-law."
Well, it's I don't know. It's certainly in the news at the moment, isn't it? Everybody's been listening out, see what certain people have got to say.
Well, it's the heavyweight champ, and it's a split decision with the heavyweight champ, the Laniel.
With a debutant.
And the champs won, but he didn't want to do a presser. What's all that about, Jules?
I don't know if he's embarrassed or
questions about Usyk. Well, the Usyk thing all the scam just to get everybody to buy an Ngannou fight. To say, we've got the Usyk fight. Look, it's all signed and sealed. Well, the one thing Brown says.
One thing's for sure, and you and I said this last week when we did the preview. We said no matter what happens, and I'd love to play it back because I'm trying to remember what we talked about, but we talked about Ngannou and Fury, and I thought it'd be I said, I think Fury will beat him hands down. I says, but he's in with a big physical man. He could get cut. He could bust his hand. Anything can happen. We said, didn't we? There's no way he's going to fight the December the 23rd.
Yeah.
Not a chance. And he's not, is he? So that's gone. Joshua's now saying he's going to fight in January. He's now talking about Ngannou. None of these guys do what they're supposed to do they? I mean, Conor Ben's now on about fighting Eubank's brother or cousin or something. Oh, gunners, Arsenal fans, the amount of gunners we've got in boxing is just unbelievable. Maybe it's like I said at the beginning of part one, maybe the sport is just slowly dying. They're just rinsing it until there's nothing left, and you can't blame them because maybe the Eddie Earns of this world can see where boxing is going to be in 5 to 10 years. They've got data and analytics to prove it, and maybe they know where it's heading, so they're just thinking, let's get the fun fights and the big event fights as many as we can before we shut the door on it. I don't know.
You reckon?
Yeah. It's the boxing's killed itself, and the world's changing. There's just a multitude of so many different things, but it's like I've always said to you, I always used to it's like when the proliferation of the world title belts, that's the one thing that gets me more than anything. You know that it always has done. When you got 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 world champions, it's a joke, right? When that started to come, that was always an unhealthy thing. And all I ever used to hear was people say, it's good for the fighters, it's good for the promoters, it's good for the managers, it's good for the broadcasters because they can say it's a world title fight. IBO World Championship Boxing from Batley Sports Centre, 30 people there, but it's an IBO belt, so it's a world title, so it's amazing. Then they'll pop it on Channel 5 or on BBC or wherever in the day. And this is boxing slowly breaking up. So the belts for me, people always said, yeah, but multiple belts are good for fighters and they're good for the sport. And I always said it's not. I said it's like having closing an hospital, closing a cancer wing on an hospital. I says, you can say, well, yeah, but it's double time for the builders who's pulling it down. people can make money out of closing it down, demolition, whatever. We can build something else on the land. I said it's short term good. Short term, it's good. People are rinsing something that's pure and that's good, and then eventually there's nothing left. And I think that's what they've done with boxing. And I think it's been a slow decline. You've heard me say this before, that 2 belts I could live with. 11, 12-year-old when the IBF came out, and I was like, I said this before on here, this is not good. This is not good for boxing. And then we introduced more weight classes. We got the super middleweights and light flyweight and all this stuff. And then it's just hard to control. And I think there are so many different factors now. And I think, I think the breaking up of the titles and creating new world titles was one of the biggest things that's killed boxing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just makes it so hard for people to understand, and makes it so hard for people to love, and it makes it so hard to explain why in 25 years we've never had one heavyweight champion. You can't explain that to people. So if they don't understand it, they're just not interested in it.
Do you think if Usyk and Fury don't happen, right, we're never gonna get an undisputed? Do you think it's further away than ever?
What I do think, and I said this to Max recently, me and Max were chatting. I said, as we know it, I don't think we'll ever have another great heavyweight champion of the world. When I define greatness, I'm talking about quantity, longevity, cleaning, dominant, cleaning out the division. I don't think we'll ever have another great heavyweight champion of the world ever again. I might think Tyson Fury is the best of his generation. I might think Alexander Usyk's a great fighter. I don't think Alexander Usyk's a great heavyweight champion.
Yeah.
Because his body of work at heavyweight is not great.
Yeah.
Chisora. Who did he beat? Witherspoon, Chisora, Joshua. Daniel Dubois. That's not a great body of work at heavyweight, is it? But he's a great fighter. Yeah. See where I'm coming from? Tyson Fury, best of his generation. I don't think he's a great champion. I don't think he's a guy who's racking up defense after defense after defense because they get paid so damn much. Yeah. And we have all these belts out there. And how do you make sense of it all? So the belts will break up and it just becomes confusing. So I don't believe. So, for example, the up-and-coming heavyweights, the Frank Sanchez's, the couple of guys we saw on Saturday night, Fabio Wardley, I thought was fantastic. Did exactly what I thought it would do. Thought that was a good performance. Moses Aitumai. These kids coming through, they might be, Russell, potentially great heavyweights, but they'll never be great heavyweight champions because they won't fight each other. Yeah. They'll all hold multiple belts and splintered belts, and there's just no appetite for it. And the managers, the advisors, and everybody involved, they're all to blame because they're all. I mean, you've got Eddie Hearn now. He's got one eye on Manuel Char, hasn't he? And Joshua thinking, oh, we can make him a 3-time heavyweight champion of the world. So if Anthony Joshua somehow gets to fight Manuel Char and one guy steps out and AJ steps in, just an example, yeah? Then Anthony Joshua's name is up there with Ali, Holyfield, and Lennox Lewis.
Irregular belt.
This is how people view it because people don't understand. Eddie Hearn's already said it can be a 3-time world champion. Okay. Do you understand where I'm coming from? This is a joke. This is dire. It's a joke.
Eddie try and pass it off as that, won't he?
I can see it. Manuel Char, he fights less than me. I can see.
It's not as if he's got another belt and he's adding regular, is it?
It's just dire. I mean, the guy who Daniel Dubois beat, that big whale he made King Charles Martin look like Sonny Liston, didn't he? It was just dreadful. And then Daniel Dubois said he's a former champion. It's a joke, mate. It's a joke. It's a demise of sport, and money and greed is at the root of everything. You know, look how the British fighters traded off the WBO belt. You know, suddenly when we realised it had a bit of value where the commercials were concerned, where Sky was concerned and ITV were concerned, and we had this Chris Eubank Jr.'s reign as a WBO world champion, which under the microscope was bloody awful, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh,
I'm a big fan of Joe Calzaghe, but look at some of the guys who Joe Calzaghe defended against.
Branko Sobot and Tucker Podwell and Edgar
Tucker,
McCurchin.
and the guy from the Contender, and yeah,
Oh, Peter
Tucker
Manfredo, I like middleweight.
Who can remember Tucker Podwell and these?
Lorry driver Tucker.
You see where I'm coming from.
What about Goat Herder Branko Sobot first defense? Goat Herder.
Yeah, and this is what we've. Meanwhile, the Tonys, the Nuns, the McCallums, and the McClellans, and those guys were putting on massive fights in the States. And
I was Ark in this bedroom.
sorry, I've got someone at the door by the sounds of it. Sorry, Russell, my son's just come in, that's all. We always get a George interruption. My lads come up.
Pop, pop, bang.
But yeah, do you see where I'm coming from? I know I'm like an old
see
man.
where you what Joe Calzaghe's WBO Reign of Terror.
It was
right, the missing F with that Reign of Terror.
And I thought Calzaghe was brilliant, but what an empty period of his career. 10 years doing nothing.
I know.
10, what was it, 10 years his reign?
Yeah, and he spent 9 months where he Cobra. He couldn't sleep when Cobra were mandatory, breathing down his neck.
10 years. God. It's like, think back, yeah. You think back, right? I can't help myself. Right. 1979, Ray Leonard beat Wilfredo Benitez, legend, the fifth king.
Yeah.
Heavyweight world champion, the youngest ever world champion, age 17. Just Benitez was an all-time great by the time he fought Ray Leonard. A year later, Ray Leonard fought Roberto Duran twice. And then a year after that, he fought Thomas the Hitman Hearns. So in the space of 2 years, Ray Leonard fought Benitez, Duran twice, and Tommy Hearns. And in 10 years, Joe, stay-at-home Joe, beat Tucker Podwell. He beat Mario Vite twice. Some of the guys they used to line up, I don't know where they got them from. And I'm not knocking Joe Calzaghe. I thought it was a phenomenal fight. But what I'm knocking is the way that boxing is. You got promoters.
Wasted years when he should have been chasing Michael.
Wasted years when he could have been, even if he'd lost a few
times,
he could have been in with the elite. And this is what I'm saying. I'm pinpointing
Fury.
How belts and our organizations and our broadcasters, the hijack champions. We got Calzaghe. We can build a show around him. We can fill an arena out with him. But we'll put some guys on the undercard, and we're going to trade off that WBO belt for the next 10 years against mediocrity. And this is killing boxing because everybody's making money in the short term, and eventually it just disintegrates. You got the IBO now. People are starting to take the IBO seriously. Or are they just taking the rest of them not as serious? I don't know.
Well, they've all got faults, haven't they? There's only really IBF that stick to rules, I think. And that's only because government, they're on them every 12 months, aren't they? And they have been.
I don't rate belts. I don't rate them. I rate fighters, and I rate the best fighters in the world. And I try and ignore the nonsense. And I mean, AJ was a unified champion, wasn't he? And
I mean, look how he got them belts, Big Meech.
Well, Eddie bought the belts, didn't he? He bought King Charles Martins because Fury thought it was a prick and he wouldn't work with him. Wilder was the same, and Eddie was desperate for a piece of the heavyweight championship, so he could trade off it. So Sky could trade off it. See where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
So they could advertise it as a heavyweight champion of the world fight, when ultimately, you know as well as I do, that wasn't an heavyweight title fight.
No,
so this is what's wrong. This is where boxing's just done itself in just for over the last few decades. So we still get great fights, but they're getting fewer and fewer and further away. But guess what? Your average guy in the street doesn't care about it now. They don't care about Josh Taylor fighting Teofimo Lopez. They actually don't care about it.
They care about Tommy Fury against Jake Paul. Two worlds collide.
And how many views did that do? How many pay-per-views? It was massive, wasn't it? Massive.
Go and have a piss and they get 1 million views, then, boys.
Are we doing another part, Russell?
Yeah,
My,
we might as
my,
well.
my
On to
battery's going to
part
go.
3.
1 minute. All right, mate.
In a minute. Pop, pop, bang. Thanks for liking and subscribing and leaving a comment. Booyaka.